Medieval political thought. Medieval political thought represents a distinctive synthesis of classical philosophy and Christian theology, producing a worldview in which politics was not autonomous but subordinated to divine authority. Unlike modern political theory, which often treats politics as an independent sphere governed by human reason or popular consent, medieval thinkers understood political life as embedded within a larger moral and cosmic order established by God. Politics in this framework existed not to maximize liberty or equality, but to promote order, justice, and salvation within a divinely structured universe. Fusion of classical philosophy and Christian theology, medieval political theory emerged from the encounter between Greco-Roman philosophy, particularly Aristotle, and Christian theological doctrine. Classical ideas about virtue, natural order, and the purpose of political community were preserved, translated, and reinterpreted through a Christian lens. Rather than rejecting classical philosophy, medieval thinkers sought to harmonize reason and revelation. Human reason was seen as a gift from God, capable of understanding aspects of moral and political order, but ultimately incomplete without divine guidance. As a result, political authority was never viewed as purely human or self-justifying. It derived its legitimacy from alignment with God's will and moral law. Politics subordinated to divine authority. In medieval political thought, politics was not sovereign. Divine authority stood above all human institutions, including kings, emperors, and laws. Earthly rulers governed only by permission, not by right inherent in their office. This subordination produced a fundamentally different conception of sovereignty than that found in modern states. No ruler possessed unlimited authority. Political power was always conditional upon obedience to divine law and moral truth. Human law was valid only insofar as it reflected higher law. Hierarchical worldview. Medieval political thought assumed a hierarchical structure of reality, in which authority flowed downward from God through ordained institutions. The typical hierarchy was understood as God, the ultimate source of law, authority, and moral order; the church, guardian and interpreter of divine truth; the monarch, temporal ruler charged with enforcing order and justice subjects; individuals whose duty was obedience within moral bounds. This hierarchy reflected the belief that inequality of roles did not imply injustice. Order, not equality, was the primary political virtue. Each level of society had defined responsibilities consistent with God's design. Key themes of medieval political thought: legitimacy through divine sanction. Political legitimacy in the medieval world rested on divine sanction, not popular consent. Kings ruled by the grace of God, and obedience was generally considered a moral duty. However, divine sanction did not mean arbitrary power. Rulers were bound by God's law and could lose legitimacy if they governed unjustly. Authority was sacred but not unconditional. Moral limits on rulers. A defining feature of medieval political thought was the insistence that rulers were subject to moral limits. Tyranny, rule for personal gain rather than the common good, was considered illegitimate. Although medieval thinkers generally discouraged rebellion, they maintained that unjust laws were not true laws and that rulers who violated divine or natural law forfeited moral authority. This idea planted early seeds for later theories of limited government. Contributions of Thomas Aquinas. The most influential medieval political thinker was Thomas Aquinas, who offered the most systematic integration of Aristotelian philosophy and Christian theology. Natural law. Aquinas argued that natural law is the rational participation of human beings in God's eternal law. Through reason, humans can discern basic moral principles, such as justice, preservation of life, and the common good, that should guide political authority. Human laws are legitimate only if they align with natural law. Laws that contradict moral reason are not binding in conscience. Moral constraints on political authority. For Aquinas, political authority exists to promote the common good, not the ruler's self-interest. Legitimate government requires justice, moral restraint, and concern for the well-being of the community. While Aquinas preferred monarchy for its unity and stability, he emphasized that all forms of government are corruptible and must be constrained by moral law. This framework preserved authority while denying absolutism. Enduring tension between church and state. The medieval synthesis produced a persistent tension between spiritual and temporal authority. If divine law governed all aspects of life, who had final authority in political matters, the church or the state? Conflicts between popes and monarchs reflected this unresolved tension. The church claimed moral supremacy, while kings asserted political independence. Neither side achieved permanent dominance, and the struggle shaped centuries of European political development. This tension laid the groundwork for later debates about sovereignty, secular authority, and the separation of church and state. Concluding perspective. Medieval political thought presents a vision of politics ordered by moral hierarchy, divine law, and ethical restraint. Authority was real and necessary, but never absolute. Rulers governed under God, law under morality, and politics under theology. Although modern political theory largely rejects this framework, its legacy endures in concepts such as natural law, moral limits on power, and the belief that authority must answer to higher principles than force or will.